The natural way of running, raw and honest. You get out exactly what you put in. There are no cutting corners and you are forced to be as efficient as possible or nature will strike you down with injury. But when mastered, it's the most wonderful feeling in the world. At the bottom of our physical being is a web of intricate design, thick rubber band-like connective tissue that propels us forward one step after the other. 200,000 sensory receptors can be found at the bottom of each foot, sending a constant stream of information to our body, our brain, and our entire being. The toes are free to splay, flex, and feel. They are our conductors, surveying the environment and letting us know of any alterations of terrain that we must account for. Our feet are alive with sensation. A stream of physical and spiritual consciousness is felt through the strength of our ancestors. Each breath taken, we are transported back in time, gliding across the terrain in pursuit of our goal. It may not be for blood, but it is felt in our being. We are on the hunt. As the heart rate increases, so does our speed. Each step gets more spring-like and effortless. The cobwebs have been brushed from the legs and our body is now in flow as one. Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Jaspar and for the past 6 years I've been experimenting and learning about the benefits of strengthening up our feet. Through this experience I've learned a lot about the importance, the pros and cons of training barefoot and in minimalist footwear, and how we can use this information to become stronger and healthier long term. Barefoot training has truly opened up my eyes to what we are capable of physically and how this shift in perspective has allowed my mind to be more flexible and understanding towards the human body and longevity of health. So I hope you're excited to learn about the importance of our feet and how we can use this information to radically transform our health. So I'm going to break down the important functions of our feet and how to get started with improving their strength and their capabilities so you can still wear the shoes you love just without some of the modern day injuries and problems we run into from relying on them too much for support. Speaking of these problems, you may have experienced some of these in the past. These can be things such as plantar fasciitis, shin splints, bunions, hammer toes, collapsed arches, tendon sprains, the list goes on. Now, there are pros and cons to being barefoot all the time, the same way that there are pros and cons to wearing restrictive footwear all the time. But if we can learn to build up strong, mobile and resilient feet, learn how to exercise and move correctly while landing on our bare feet, nice and soft and supple, under control, then we can use modern day footwear to our advantage and enjoy the benefits of cushioning and protection. However, if we neglect the abilities of our feet and rely upon the shoes and the cushioned footwear, then we'll lose the natural movement abilities in our feet and lose our ability to absorb force correctly, which results in sloppy, uncontrolled movement patterns and long-term injuries. So this is about finding a balance between having healthy, strong and mobile feet while also enjoying the benefits that modern day technology can provide us in terms of our footwear. Now, our feet contain over 100 muscles, ligaments and tendons, 26 bones and 30 joints, all interwoven into an intricate structure that provides us mobility, stability and the very foundation that we walk upon each day. So, let's break down 5 main functions of the feet and how this relates to our movement and our posture. Okay, so the first function I want to discuss is the sensory receptors found in each foot. Now, like I discussed briefly earlier, each foot contains over 200,000 sensory receptors. And when I first heard this figure, it just blew my mind. There is so much information that our feet are receiving day to day. Literally every step we take. So the sensory receptors in the bottom of our feet receive information as they are surveying the environment and feeling the ground beneath them. And this sends signals right through our body and allows our posture to, basically our body to understand how to hold its posture when the terrain is changing. So whether it's as simple as walking around your home, walking up and down steps, around town, or to more technical things like running through trails, or we may be doing some more explosive work in the gym, like jumping or balancing, for example, and these sensory receptors are necessary to be sending this constant stream of information through the body, as they basically work instantaneously. So as soon as our feet touch the ground, every step, this information, boom, sent through the body, and we know how to alter our posture on the fly, just like that. So let's take an exercise setting, for example. Now this could be something as basic as a squat. You may be standing stationary, or it may be a little bit more dynamic, performing a lunge where we're moving, we're adding in a bit more motion and locomotion into our movement patterns now. Or it could be something more athletic and explosive like a box jump or some side to side jumps, for example. Now all of these exercises require understanding of how we are landing on our foot and how this relates to our posture, how we're absorbing force, and how efficient we are through our movement patterns and our biomechanics. Now, when we are in bare feet or in minimalist footwear and we have full sensory feedback through the ground to our feet to the rest of our body, we are instantly a lot more aware of how we are landing. So we will pay for it if we are landing incorrectly. Now this can be detrimental if we are not readily prepared, or we are overdoing, if we are adding too much stimulus to the body without pre-preparation. But this is also equally as damaging if we are relying on the cushioning of shoes without understanding how to land correctly. And this creates a gradual build-up of damage over time through poor mechanics and basically just sloppy, uncontrolled movements. So when we can start from step one, literally step one, barefoot, doing some very simple, under control movement patterns and learning how to progress and safely build up our strength and feel the ground beneath us and gradually build more complex movement patterns into our training routine, then we can re-establish this connection from the foot receptors through our entire body, and we are essentially learning how to move in a safer, more efficient movement pattern. Because if we are not efficient, then our body, our receptors are instantly going to let us know. Now the next important function I want to discuss is the arch in our foot. So basically, if we take my hand right now, this is basically what a foot looks like when its arch is contracted, when it is shortened in a contraction, and then when it lengthens out and flattens when we step. This is basically what our foot is doing through motion as we walk, or more specifically as we run. So basically the arch is acting like a springboard to propel us forward and to stabilize our movements. Now, if we only wear restrictive footwear and do not allow the foot to be free to create this arch, then we can run into problems where the tissue in the foot becomes weak and inhibited through lack of stimulation. So the arch, basically, this is how it works. When we run forward, when we're in motion, our foot flattens and it slightly rolls inward. This is called pronation. Now, pronation is a natural function. Some people suffer from overpronation, and that is when the arch becomes severely weakened and inhibited, and our ankle rolls in too far, and then we can run into problems like knee problems from the knees buckling in too far, or hip problems, and compensatory patterns where other muscles are now trying to stabilize the body because the arch is not understanding how to function. So we can retrain our arch. We can retrain it through as simple things like walking around barefoot and beginning just to jump barefoot and just allow this natural pattern of the foot flattening and contracting, just to start re-establishing that relationship from the foot to our body and just strengthening up the muscles in the feet essentially. Now you can do specific exercises as well where you're working on the arch and the muscles that help to contract and shorten the foot to create this arch. You can perform these exercises to basically enhance and speed up the rebuilding process of these potentially inhibited and weakened muscles. Now the third function I want to talk about is the splaying of our toes. So when we run naturally barefoot, when we land, our toes splay out like this, like what I'm doing with my fingers here, to create a wider, more stable foundation. So basically it's creating more balance. Now if we have shoes that are restricting the anatomy of our foot and are squishing our toes in like this, our toes are unable to splay, and once again the muscles become inhibited. So this means the muscles and the function of the muscles that create this splay are basically not working. Now when our anatomy becomes restricted, we can run into issues like plantar fasciitis that creates a lot of pain and discomfort when we move about. So it's important to look for a shoe that is wide enough to accommodate your foot shape. Now everyone's foot shape are different. Some people have a narrower foot, so they can feel more comfortable in a more narrow toe box. But for people like myself who have a slightly wider foot and a wider structure, we require a wider toe box so our feet are not getting restricted and inhibited. And we run into these slow accumulative issues over time because our anatomy is literally being reshaped and remolded. So if you can imagine wearing a glove all day that literally squishes your fingers together, you can imagine the discomfort you would have at the end of the day when you pull that glove off. And you can imagine the relief, I should say, when you pull that glove off. Now the fourth element that I want to speak of, and this is basically carrying on from the toe splay, is more specifically the big toe itself. So like I mentioned just before about the shape of the toe box, if it is too restrictive and narrow, we can run into problems like bunions. And a lot of the time you'll see bunions where, let's just take my thumb here for example, let's say that's my big toe, and it gets pushed inward because the shoe is too narrow. Now, this is not only extremely painful, but it's very dysfunctional to how we move. So the big toe, let's take this, my hand for example again, is designed to abduct, which is when it comes away from the body like such, and it is also designed to flex, so that is when, let's say this is our foot, our big toe flexes up and down as we move, and this is basically propelling us forward. Okay, so it flexes up and down and it splays, it abducts away from the body to create this solid foundation. So we need this splaying function for stability and foundation, but we also need the toes to be able to flex up and down to bend and propel us forward. So this mobility, this overall mobility in the foot is extremely important. Like any area of the body, if it becomes inhibited and tight and restricted, we run into discomfort, we run into pain, and the functions of that area of the body are basically reduced. And that's exactly the same as our foot. If we disengage all of these natural functions of the foot and squish it into a shoe that is not accommodating, the muscles and the entire connective tissue and the bones and the entire structure becomes weak and inhibited. So we must add in some form of training that is bringing this awareness to our body and basically letting us know where our feet are currently at. So these are the main functions that I wanted to discuss, and now I'm going to give you some pointers on how to rebuild and bring some life back into those feet. So step one is very simple, and it's just being barefoot more often. So you can start in a controlled, safe environment. This may be in your home, for example, and just simply walking around and just feeling the feet, how you are landing on each step and how the feet feel. If you have any dysfunctions or problems in your foot, then these may be a little bit more prominent. You may be more aware of them in the setting, but it's very important to listen to these problems and not just slap a band-aid on them, so to speak. So it's very important that we understand in its rawest, most natural form the foot and where it currently is physically, and then we can assess where to go from there and how to fix the foot, and then how this is going to relate to the rest of our movement patterns. So step 1 is just walking around barefoot. Now step 2 is getting a little bit of myofascial release on the foot. So that's just a fancy word for massaging and releasing tension in the area. So the easiest way to get started is getting a release ball or any other hard sports ball, a rounded object, and just rolling up and down the foot to release some of the restriction in the foot. So this builds up over our entire life. If we wear too much footwear, too much restrictive footwear I should say, and the feet become inhibited, then there is going to be some tightness in the foot. So we can start really lightly, just rolling up and down a ball. And I do remember the first time I ever experienced this, and my feet were extremely painful and extremely tight. But the more we are patient and consistent with this process, the more we will release this tension over time and free up the feet and allow the rebuilding process to begin. So step 3 now is the importance of adding in some specific corrective exercise. So moving on from once we have established simply walking around barefoot and then releasing some of the tension through the foam rolling or through the myofascial release, then we can start getting a bit more specific into how we move our toes and move our feet, and then how this connects up to the rest of the body. Then you can simply just begin by just trying to move the toes around a little bit more and just getting familiar with the movement of the feet. So like I discussed all those different functions earlier, how the big toe moves away from the body, up and down, the toes like to splay, the foot likes to shorten and flatten as the arch moves. You can start playing around with these movements. You can also stretch the base of the foot out. So you can perform things like calf raises, for example, where we are going up on our toes and then down, and you can get a bit more of a stretch if you perform a calf raise up on a step. Then you can lower your heel down, stretch out the Achilles tendon, stretch out the calf muscles, and all of these simple movements will just start to re-establish the strength and the foundation of our body, our feet. So it's a nice simple way to progress from, like I said, simply being barefoot, going through the release ball work, and then going into some more complex movements. And then you can start working on just simply jumping on the spot. So jumping on the spot is going to activate the arch, it's going to activate a little bit of the splaying functions. The big toe will be needed for stability. So going through these natural movements will really start to help to rebuild not only the strength in the feet, but the receptors and just the awareness of your entire body and how you are landing and how you're absorbing force. And that leads me to tip number 4, which is reawakening the receptors. So now we can start to get into some more variety of textures and surfaces and terrains, and exposing the feet to these different surfaces. So we always want to start in a manageable, controlled environment and then increase the stimulus from there. This is basically how we change anything in our lives. But we'll stick to this exercise context for now. So let's say you've started off barefoot just on your carpet in your home and you're getting familiar with walking around. Then you can move to, say, walking outside, walking along some concrete, walking through some dirt, and just getting the receptors more stimulated and alive. So we want to stimulate the receptors just to provide more feedback and keep increasing that communication from the receptors, from the feet to the body. The more we provide this enhanced stimulus, the more of this relationship and this communication that becomes established from the feet through our entire body. We become safer, stronger movers and more confident movers. It's so important to be confident in our body when whether we are exercising or just getting around day to day. Just our general day-to-day mobility is often overlooked when it comes to exercising, as it's all movement at the end of the day. It's all just human movement. Whether we want to call it an exercise or whether we're just walking to work, it's all about moving our body. So exercise doesn't just stop when we leave the gym. It's how are we interacting with our environment from the moment we get up till the moment that we go to sleep each night. And that's very important to understand, because we can add in these little snippets of conscious movement throughout our days to really enhance our day-to-day mobility, our fitness levels, and just like I said, our confidence in how we move. So reigniting these foot receptors is such a great way to do that. And you can even get something called a Shakti mat, and I'm not sponsored by them in any way, but I do use one personally, and is a great way to re-establish those receptors by simply standing on it. Now, this will be quite painful if the receptors are, let's say, dormant and have not been stimulated much. This may cause a bit of pain, so I would recommend starting really small if you are going to progress to a Shakti mat. But like I said, just getting used to different textures, different terrains, walking about barefoot is great to re-establish that connection. Now, tip number 5 is wearing more minimalist footwear. So you can go right up to the extremes of the toe shoes, the Vibram 5 fingers, or you can get something a bit more regular looking, like a Vivo Barefoot shoe or a Zero shoe, for example, or even the brand Ultra is a great shoe that I wear personally as well, where it's shaped like a foot, but it still has cushioning, so it's more familiar of a feel as a shoe, but still provides the benefits of minimalist footwear and allows the feet to be more mobile, allows them to splay, allows them to flex, and gives them that freedom of movement. So once again, I'm not sponsored by any of these shoe companies, but I would highly recommend looking into them as an option. And the reason is, when we're wearing minimalist footwear, we're still receiving the protective benefits of footwear. So we're not going to, let's say, stand on a rock and hurt our feet, or cut our foot there might be glass around the pavement or whatever it may be. So we get the protection, but then we're also rebuilding the strength in our feet. And then we can take this into the gym, for example, and simply performing our regular strength routine in these shoes is going to allow our feet to just be stimulated more, allow that extra movement in the feet. So whether we're performing a deadlift, whether we're squatting, whether we're on the leg press, lunging, whether we're on the treadmill, all of these movements, even walking, the feet are going to be activated more, and we're going to get strength simply by performing our regular routine. So we don't have to go out of our way or spend any more time in our busy days. We can simply put on these more minimalist style shoes and gain the benefits of strengthening up the feet. Now, this doesn't mean you have to simply wear purely minimalist footwear. I myself personally, I still love a traditional shoe, a traditional running shoe, especially when it comes to running on pavement, on concrete. I prefer a much more cushioned shoe, and I'm confident because I have taught myself the correct movement patterns in bare feet that I can get the most out of the technology in these more cushioned shoes, and that's the real difference. And the final tip I want to discuss is simply taking this whole process nice and slow, being patient and understanding that it is not our fault that we have potentially weakened our feet through the reliance of overly protective and restrictive footwear. It just is the reality that most of us are currently facing in this modern day, whether we're aware of it or not. And so we must be patient in this rebuilding process of taking it step by step and just slowly reconditioning the feet and re-strengthening them. Exactly the same way that any exercise, when we first ever try it, we're going to be weak at it and we have to spend a long time to slowly build up our body and become more familiar with certain exercises. And so our feet are exactly the same. So we must understand this from the get-go, that this is going to be a long process. So once again, from a personal account, I have spent years rebuilding my feet, performing corrective exercise, performing the release work on the foot, getting used to running in minimalist footwear and moving around and just being patient with the process. But it's extremely rewarding as it relates to the health of our entire body. And if you are in this for the long term, if longevity of health is your goal, then there is no need to stress about the time that this will take, because in the long run, this is going to pay off tremendously, and you're not going to have to worry about running into foot issues later on in life. And the longer you leave it, the harder it is to regain and rebuild. So the best time to start is now. Like I said, being patient with the process and just being honest with your starting point. Some people may be at a much higher starting point. They may have fairly functional feet as it is, and some other people may be suffering more than others. So it's about understanding where your starting point is and just taking it really slow. So starting from step one, like I said, just getting familiar with walking around barefoot, then performing the release work with a solid sports ball or a release ball, rolling out the feet, reigniting the receptors, getting them used to different terrain, and then moving around and jumping barefoot and doing some light movements, learning how to squat barefoot. And then from there you can start experiencing or using minimalist footwear to exercise and really start performing most of your lower body exercises in this footwear, rebuilding the foot and just enjoying the process, because it is quite a joy when you start to see these incremental changes and quantifying the progress in terms of strength and metrics and numbers in the gym. It's all exciting. It's all about self-improvement and, like I said, just enjoying the process. So take it slow, be patient, take all of this information from this video and just apply it in a way that is going to help you personally and fit your lifestyle and fit your current state of health. So I really hope this helps. I've tried to pack in as much information as I could into this video. I know I can ramble on sometimes a bit much, but this is a much more important topic than most people are aware of when it comes to our entire physical health. It really starts from the feet and works up. We walk about every day, so we do need to take this very seriously and understand the importance. So thank you for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, you're an absolute champion. I know this is quite a long video, but I really hope it helps, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Cheers.